But also you have a little question sheet on your chair. If you've got any questions, if you can just, as we go through tonight, if you can just write them down and hold up the wee bit of paper, and one of the team will bring it down to Alice, and she'll be able to bring it up to the panel. So to start us off this evening, I'm going to hand over to SAFA's Chief Executive, Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory.
Rachel, thank you. I'm going to stand up. So some of you know Glasgow is a very special city for me, and it's wonderful to be back here. I was born here in Glasgow Maternity Hospital, Rotten Row, and I'm looking at the Lord Provost, who will absolutely know where I'm talking about. I then had 2 wonderful years as the senior army person running the Army Personnel Centre in Caledonian House in Argyle Street. So it's terrific to be back. And it's also great, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second, to celebrate so much about Glasgow Helping Heroes, which is genuinely one of the jewels in the SSAFA crown. I'm just going to talk for about 2 or 3 minutes before introducing the panel, thanking some people about SSAFA itself. So for those less familiar with SSAFA, formed in 1885 to look after families when troops went overseas, the Soldiers and Sailors Families Association was formed. The Royal Air Force came along on the 1st of April 1918. So today we are the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen's and Families Association. And we support about 80,000 people a year in many, many different ways. From young families with young children, through young service personnel and veterans, through to more senior veterans in many different ways. And we are very proud of the work we do. We genuinely change lives. What have we seen over the last 2 years? We have seen different types of need as a result of the pandemic. So quite interestingly, when the pandemic kicked in March 2020, we actually saw a reduction in people coming to us. And we think that was probably because there was less contact with family, friends, local authorities, who would be the sort of people either to refer those in need to us or say, come on, stop being so proud, have the courage to ask for support. Because one of the key challenges is veterans too often won't admit they've got a problem and then won't come to us. Numbers have picked up significantly. Our helpline in the charity is now taking about 130 to 140% of the numbers we took last year. And the prevalent themes are really significant levels of emotional distress and financial hardship, and everything tells us that is going to get more challenging. So that is where the charity is, and we are there, as we have been for 137 years, to support serving people, veterans and their families, to help them thrive, to give them back their independence and dignity. This is a great celebration. It should have happened 2 years ago to celebrate 10 years of Glasgow Helping Heroes, but we're now 12 years, and that's another consequence of the pandemic. But what I want to do is thank a number of people, because this is a unique project in SSAFA, a collaboration between the City of Glasgow, which, as I've already said, is very close to my heart, a facility called Glasgow Veterans United, which is part of how we help inspire people to realise life hasn't stopped and get up and running. So we've always thought Glasgow Helping Heroes was a bit of a jewel in the crown, but we didn't have any evidence to support it. So what's going to happen now is, in a minute, Rachel will tell you a bit more about the work she and her team do here. We've then been very lucky to work with Stirling University and Glasgow Caledonian University, and Dr. Steve Rolfe will tell you about the findings he and Dr. Fiona Henderson have uncovered, which are quite dramatic, captured in their report, and I won't steal Steve's thunder by trying to paraphrase that. And we couldn't have done it without Forces in Mind Trust, and Tom McDarnett, who's the Chief Executive of Forces in Mind Trust, will tell you a little bit about that. So this is yet again a partnership in the city of Glasgow to help people who've served in the military and their families get back up and running. And Steve and Tom will explain why it's so important and delivers such wonderful effect. But before that, Rachel will tell you a bit more about what they do.
Thank you. So, as Andrew said, it's almost two events rolled into one. We'd planned to have a 10th birthday party, but that obviously didn't happen. But around the time we were planning that, we started working with Steve on this evaluation. So we rolled the two in together so that we can have a 12th birthday party and also tell you the results of this evaluation. So Glasgow's Helping Heroes started in 2010, and for those that don't know, it's a holistic drop-in service for the armed forces community in Glasgow. And it's great to see tonight so many of our partners and some of our clients as well, and people that maybe we could work with in future as well, and some of the GHH team who have left us and they've come back tonight to join the celebration, so thank you. So over the past 12 years, I think the initial concept of Glasgow's Helping Heroes has evolved, and hopefully with each iteration we've found more ways and better ways to support the armed forces community. So at the moment we'll support people with housing needs, whether that's from street homelessness through to, oh there goes our report, street homelessness through to maybe they're in unsuitable housing, or they want to make an aspirational move, or sometimes helping people get on the property ladder that didn't know that was an option for them. Also work with our clients who maybe want to volunteer or get into work, helping them with training courses or linking them with different potential employers and giving them the support they need in that area. Obviously we work as same throughout SSAFA with all the other military charities that award funding for our clients, so putting their case forward and finding the appropriate people to ask for support. And probably about half our clients receive some sort of financial assistance, but by no means all. And some of our clients, they don't need one of those specific things, but there's maybe a group we're running that will help them meet other veterans or members of the armed forces community that they can get to know and provide support to each other. And at the moment we've got 3 different projects running. We've got, as Andrew mentioned, we've got Glasgow's Veterans United, GVU, which is our football project. We've got a curling project, although in the summer we're doing all sorts of different things, called ICE, and that's for, that stands for Inclusive Curling for Ex-Forces, so that's for anybody really that wants to come along. And we've got our Mirrors group that is specifically maybe for our beneficiaries or clients that don't want to come and play curling or football, but gives them a chance to get together and do all sorts of different activities as well. And shortly they're going to start learning Spanish, which is fantastic. I'm hoping we can have a bit of a tapas meal at the end of that session as well. So we've got a real variety, because we've got a real variety of clients. We have some that are teenagers through to, during one of the lockdowns, I took a birthday card and a cake to somebody that turned 100. So we've got the full range of the armed forces community that we're supporting. Steve's going to talk to you obviously about the evaluation period, and as Andrew said, our numbers did go down during the peak of the pandemic, because we're not quite through it yet. And during the evaluation period for 12 months, we saw 299 clients, but so far in 2022, we've already supported 246 clients. So the need is very much still there. It's different to what it was a year ago, but the need is still there. And we've got some of our funders in the room, so thank you, because that's allowed us to expand the team and to hopefully work with all these people to meet their needs that they have. I'm going to stop talking now for a bit. So What I'm going to do is hand you over. We've got an example of two of our clients that we have supported who, when we first started working with them, were very separate clients, and now they're a married couple. So it's a lovely video, so that's going to play just now for you. So I'm introducing Sean and Ashley.
Not my team.
I joined the Army Reserves in 2009. I served a total of 13 plus years. My injury happened during the Olympics 2012. We were doing physical training exercise and I fell quite awkwardly and I landed shoulders first, shoulders, neck, back. They did various scans and they found an 18mm cyst growing in my spine. It's a condition called syringomelia, which then affects other aspects of your health, i.e. swelling in the neck, the migraines, the pain, the trouble walking, etc. So my medical discharge was a bit of a surprise. All I really had was the clothes on my back and a couple of possessions. Because I was coming out of the military setting, I didn't have a home.
Joined the infantry, and obviously I went into training, but it wasn't really for me, so I stuck most of the training out and then signed off before the end. Basically, I was living with my mum she has multiple sclerosis, so I was like a carer as well as working. I think I just had a basic overload and had a bit of a mental breakdown, just with everything happening. I'd lost my job at the time, and then when I got through that, I ended up being street homeless.
Glasgow Helping Heroes and SSAFA, the work that they did was invaluable. It helped with the disability side of things, how to access the disabled side of benefits, etc. Help us get this property. The support has pretty much been ongoing, been so helpful to have somebody that I know that I could phone at any point and say I have a problem with benefits or I have a problem with this, could you help? And nothing is too much for them. They've been amazing.
There was apparently a lot of things that I was entitled to that I knew nothing about, so they got me involved with all that, and then they said they do. I'm a Rangers fan. There was a course down at Rangers, the club, Glasgow Veterans United, so that's basically like a wellbeing and fitness thing. I've done that for about 2 or 3 years now. I keep going back. I think I'm a veteran of the veteran course now. They do a great job. With all, like I say, with myself, I'm not as a long-serving veteran, so they take that into account. It doesn't really matter whether you've been there a day, a year, 25 years, whatever. They treat you on the same level with the same issues. It's right across the board.
If it wasn't for SSAFA, if it wasn't for the support and the help, I wouldn't have met my husband, I wouldn't have the house, and I wouldn't actually finally have somewhere that's home.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks Andrew and Rachel for the introductions. I'm Dr. Steve Rolfe. I led the evaluation of Glasgow's Helping Heroes over the last 2 years, along with my colleague Dr. Fiona Henderson, who's sitting very quietly and has said she won't take any questions. It feels like a real privilege to be able to have this opportunity to share with you the findings from the research, because going beyond what we've seen from a couple of the clients, there is a really strong evidence base from our research about the enormous value that Glasgow's Helping Heroes delivers and the real life-changing support that it provides for veterans and the wider armed forces community in Glasgow. It also, I have to say, feels a little bit of a relief to have got here. We started off this project in January 2020. Anybody remember that time back in January 2020? And then things happened. And so it's been a bit of a challenge for the research at times, I have to say. But in many ways, the last 2 years, I think, have really emphasised the enormous value of a service like Glasgow's Helping Heroes for those members of the armed forces community who face difficulty in life. And a lot of people have faced difficulty over the last 2 years, and people always will face difficulties. And that's where Glasgow's Helping Heroes can really make a significant difference to people. So I've got a set of slides. I'll try not to be too academic and boring. I will have to do the Chris Whitty thing and ask for next slide, please, at various points, so just bear with me if that doesn't quite work smoothly. What I'm going to do is talk you through what we did, how we went about it. And so looking at the impact of GHH, including a social return on investment analysis, and I'll explain a bit what that is in a minute. And then we were also helping GHH to improve their own approach to monitoring outcomes so that they can continue to generate that story about impact in the future. 3 phases of the research. I'll talk through the first 2 quite briefly and then focus on the last one. So we did some theory of change work just to clarify exactly what it is that GHH delivers and how it does it. We did some work with the organisation to look at improving outcome measurement. And then lastly, we did the full evaluation over a year of activity to generate the social return on investment analysis. Next slide, please. So the first phase, as I say, was a theory of change. Some of you may know what this means. It's a fancy academic term for a kind of model that sets out what an organisation is trying to do and how it's trying to do it. And that's the crucial bit, is this kind of goal of what the organisation is trying to deliver. Ultimately, GHH is trying to deliver this idea of a good life for all their clients and being set up for the future. And that's based on a number of different aspects, some of which Rachel has mentioned. So getting housing sorted, having a secure, comfortable home, getting financial stability, getting employment or day-to-day purpose where people are retired or not able to work, improving health and well-being, getting good community and social support set up, a kind of lump of slightly less tangible outcomes, but which are in many ways underpin all of the others around resilience, independence, pride, dignity, all of which are particularly important for some veterans coming from that military background. And lastly, and I think this might seem like a kind of minor and particular point, but one of the things that GHH does well is to build people's confidence to seek support, because we all know that some veterans find it difficult to ask for support. Coming from a kind of military ethos of pride and self-reliance, it's hard to ask for support when life is difficult. So building that confidence either to come back to GHH or to go to somewhere else and actually being able to ask for support brings us back to the top of the slide, being set up for the future. So when life throws something at you later on, you're ready to deal with it and ask for support. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a bit more about this later on, but the other thing we did in the theory of change was to look at what are the key characteristics of the service, how does it actually work, and then we, through the research, try to analyse, okay, what are the most important parts there. So there are some organisational characteristics. Rachel mentioned this idea of a one-stop shop, which is very important. Some of the ways that staff operate, their understanding of veterans' experience is really important. And then some aspects of the approach to service delivery. So things like being very person-centred, starting from where people are at. But I'll explain a bit more about them later on. Next slide, please. And then phase 2, again, I won't talk about this in enormous detail, but one of the second phase was looking at how Glasgow's Helping Heroes as an organisation can improve the way that they measure their own outcomes in the future. We did some options appraisal work with them and helped them to implement the Independence Outcomes Star, which is a tool for measuring outcomes, but it's also a collaborative developmental tool that is used in work with clients. And crucially, it fitted very well with the way that GHH works, so it's targeted on the same kind of outcomes and works very well in terms of how GHH actually works with clients. Next slide, please. I'm not going to explain this graph in a lot of detail. I just like to put some nice colour on my slides, otherwise they get very texty. But this is a very brief summary of the Independence Outcome Star data from the first year. And you'll see that the kind of green bars here are where clients are making steps forward on their journey for change. So they are really moving forward. Grey is where they're kind of not moving very far, and red is where they're falling back. But the overall picture is very positive. And as I say, one of the important things here is that it works well as a collaborative tool, which is focused very much on client progress and in a shared process. So it's not just about GHH doing things for people, it's about working together with clients so that they can build their own skills to become more independent and to manage the difficulties that life might throw at them. And there's just one little story I'd like to throw in here to illustrate the value of this approach, which came from one of the team members in GHH, and I think is a really interesting illustration of the way that they work. So he was talking about having worked with someone. They'd done an initial outcome star measurement when they started. Life was pretty difficult. They were scoring very low across all of the different areas within the star. Their main issue was about housing. They were living in really quite inadequate housing, and that was quite a difficult thing to resolve. About 3 or 4 months later, they were still working with them, still hadn't resolved the housing issue, but they thought, okay, well, let's just see where they've got to. So they used the star again to measure progress. And despite the fact that the housing issue was not resolved, they were still living in really quite inadequate housing. The client felt like their life had moved on in all these different areas, like they had made substantial steps forward in terms of their control over their housing situation, even if they weren't actually living in better housing. And that was reflected in other areas of their life as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I just realised, that's fascinating, isn't it? The number's not on the screen. This is what happens when you have slides and you put them onto a different computer, but that's great because I can reveal it. Or maybe it's on the next slide. We'll find out in a minute. There's always... So the last bit that I really want to talk about in a bit more depth was the full evaluation using a social return on investment analysis. So those of you who don't know, SROI is a framework for trying to measure social impact. So most accounting systems focus only on the economics. They only look at the money. And what SROI tries to do is to go, okay, when we're looking at social impact, so someone getting a new house, someone getting a new job, someone's well-being improved, how can we measure that and measure it in a comparable way? And it does that by developing financial proxies, so creating a kind of financial value for those social impacts. And then ultimately you can use that to create a ratio so that you can say for every £1 that's invested in the service, you get so many pounds worth of social value, and I'll reveal the number in a minute. To do that, we did a number of things. We interviewed a whole range of stakeholders, so all of the organisations that GHH works with, and there's quite a wide range of organisations to make sure that we were focusing on the right areas. We interviewed a number of clients to understand really what was working for them in their lives and how GHH was actually working with them. And lastly, we analysed a whole, Fiona's smiling at me, a whole pile of GHH data over a year to actually measure that social impact and see what change GHH was delivering. So this is the big one on the next slide. I was wrong, it is on the next one. So next slide, please. So our analysis suggests that for every £1 that goes into GHH, the organisation delivers £6.63 of social value. Now that's a really substantial number and a real indication, a really strong summary of the impact that the service has for clients. That's a really enormous amount of social value for the relatively small amount of investment that comes in from funders. We did a couple of things to check that. So we did some sensitivity analysis, which are varying the parameters, which suggests that that figure is about in the middle of the range. So we're very confident in that as a robust estimate of the social value. And the other thing which I think is really important here is, as Rachel was saying, some of the numbers dropped quite significantly during the lockdowns, during the pandemic, and the period that we were looking at was through some of those lockdowns. So what we tried to do was estimate what that number would have been in a normal year, whatever normal means. I don't think any of us really know anymore, but using earlier years' data, we did some further estimation, and that suggests that in a normal year, the social return on investment would be more like £11 something. We came up with a figure of £11.68. So that's a really huge return on investment. That shows the enormous life-changing impact that GHH has. So big numbers, but in many ways for us as researchers, and I think in some ways for the organisation, the number is a useful summary, but in many ways it's not the most important finding. So what I'd like to go on to and finish up with is I've got a number of quotes from clients and from partner organisations which really illustrate what it is that GHH does, how it does it, and the types of impact that it has on people's lives. And crucially, that's built on the way that GHH works. So one of the vital aspects of GHH is that the organisation really recognises the challenges that some veterans face. And this is just a summary of some of the key ones. So we all know that some veterans find it really difficult to get to grips with the complex civilian bureaucratic world. When you've been in the forces, particularly if you've been in for a while, you're only having to deal with one institution at any time. You come out and you have to deal with the Department for Work and Pensions, with a housing organisation, with the council, with the health service. They're all different, they all work in slightly different ways, they're all complicated. They all talk a different language, and if you're talking military language, that's another language altogether. Veterans constantly tell us, unsurprisingly, that they're being asked to repeat their story over and over again, and that can be really challenging, particularly if there's any trauma in that story. And that all feeds into that reluctance to ask for help as well, which is a real problem. So the way that GHH deals with all of those issues is very much through the other aspects on this slide. So this accessible one-stop shop, having everything in one place, or being able to access things through that one door, providing that support to navigate the complex public sector and other services that people have to deal with, and doing that through expert knowledge of those housing, welfare and other systems in a person-centred, flexible way with really strong proactive communication. And then that last one, again, is really important for some veterans when they're used to things happening, when they're expecting to happen, when they're in the forces. They come out and things don't quite happen in that way. They're slow, they're bureaucratic, there are delays, you get sent around the houses. So GHH being able to deliver that really proactive communication to keep people up to date when there are delays is really important to keep people engaged. So next slide, please. I'll just move on to some of the quotes. I should say that the pictures on here are illustrative. These are not quotes from the people in the pictures specifically. So a couple of things that are really important in terms of the way that GHH works with clients, and I've highlighted, I know this is a lot to read, so I've highlighted the important words. Lots of clients told us that it was really important for them because of that issue around pride and embarrassment at having struggled with life for whatever reason. You know, it's not people's fault that they're finding life difficult, but they're embarrassed, understandably. So the fact that GHH doesn't judge them, that they have this sense of being respected, not being judged, enables people to get through that door and to accept the support that's there for them. And then this second point there about, again, this is someone saying, I hate to ask for help. You know, the classic line, and I don't ask for help, I just crack on, I get on with it, I don't ask for help. But what GHH is able to do for some clients is to help them, but also help them to ask for help. That's what I was mentioning earlier, that confidence to seek support when you need it. Next slide, please. There's a lot of text on this. Apologies, I was going to put them up one at a time, but IT doesn't let us to do that at the moment. This slide is really talking about the importance of that aspect of navigation that I mentioned, that enabling people to get through the complex bureaucracies that they need to navigate in order to get housing or benefits or employment or whatever it might be. So the top quote here is someone, one of the partner organisations, talking about the fact that if a veteran comes to them for help with something, they can help with that one thing, but they'll then have to say, right, well, and for housing you'll need to phone them, and for your health you'll need to phone them, and then you'll need to phone them, and then they'll not answer, so you'll have to ring them back, all of those kind of things. And what this partner organisation was saying, that from their perspective it's really valuable to be able to say you can go to GHH and they'll help you with everything. You don't have to keep ringing around the houses. And then the second quote kind of emphasises that in relation to housing, and this is something that I know very well from previous research that we've done. For veterans there can be a particular issue around housing because they might be serving in one part of the country, then they'll move back home or to a different part of the country, and the housing regulations are different everywhere. And in Glasgow it's particularly complicated. We have more than 60 housing associations, plus the local authority, plus other, so it's very complicated. And what GHH is able to do with the particular housing expertise they have is help people to navigate their way through that and to get secure, appropriate housing. And then the last quote here is an illustration from the perspective of a client who's talking about the challenge of approaching a public sector organisation. In this case, it's the job centre. And that sense of the stress, the anxiety that they experience going somewhere like that, and the way that means that they can't really communicate properly, they can't get their needs across. And that what GHH is able to do is to provide them with that calm, respectful environment and the support that they need to communicate their needs effectively to whoever it is that can actually provide the services that they need. So next slide, please, and this, you'll be pleased to hear, is the last one. So just a couple of quotes to illustrate the enormous size of the impact really for individuals, and this in some ways is the most important bit. This top quote might feel a bit extreme in some ways, someone talking about the fact that the support they had from GHH gave them a reason for living, gave them a reason to keep going, and they were really, really struggling, and all of the kind of practical support they're talking about, carpets and fridge and all of those kind of things actually enabled them to keep going with life, and they went from being really down to really quite happy. That might seem a bit extreme, but this is by far from being the only person who said this kind of thing. We heard this repeatedly, the number of people who were saying, I had got into a really dark place, a really difficult place, for a range of different reasons across different clients, and what GHH was able to do through emotional support and through practical support was able to kind of help them to turn their lives around and move forward positively. And that relates to the final quote there. Lots of clients talked about the fact that it had been really difficult, they'd got into this difficult place, but through the support they had from GHH, that they are now moving forward positively with life. So not just dealing with the immediate issues that took them through that door, but actually moving forward positively, whether that's about employment or volunteering or other aspects of life. And I really like this idea of the only way is up, and that kind of sentiment is really what we got from clients about how they felt when they were leaving GHH, moving on with life. So thank you, that's all I've got to say. Next slide please says thank you, just in case you didn't hear me. So thank you, that's all I have to say, and I think Tom is going to say a few words, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, have you got No, you'll be pleased to hear. Andrew, I haven't. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Andrew and Rachel, for the invitation. And thank you, Steve and Fiona, for putting together a really fantastic report. So, it's great to see it being launched. For those who don't know much about Forces in Mind Trust, I'll explain a little bit. We're a national lottery-funded trust, and our mission is to support the successful and sustainable transition into civilian life of all ex-service persons and their dependents. We do that by supporting initiatives that will underpin good policy and also good practice. And I'm sure that many of you will understand that central to that has got to be a sound evidence base. And we're really interested in making sure that the research and evidence base is there to make sure that we get things changed in the way we want them, and we support the people who are so important to us. I think it was probably about 10 years ago when Forces in Mind Trust, my predecessor back some time ago, first came to Glasgow Helping Heroes, but we've long been impressed with a model of service delivery which is unique in so many ways in providing a holistic approach to understanding the needs of its beneficiaries, but also getting to grips with the service delivery that's so important to them. And at the heart of that has been the unique partnership with Glasgow City Council and of course with other partners too. But of course, with plenty of anecdotal evidence out there, we also absolutely understood the need to have a very rigorous analysis and objective study of the true benefits of this approach. And I think it's testimony, as Steve has so ably articulated, that actually we can see that actually coming out in the figures which I think are really meaningful and really quite impressive. So I think a project that really got to grips with the benefits of providing that objective evidence, that really understood the value of expert knowledge, of accessibility, of having a really person-centred approach to delivery, of one that got to grips with the unpicking the complications of navigating many of the difficult services that people have to address these days, was something that was obviously attractive to us. And so naturally we were pleased to support it. It very much fitted our aims. So I think this report underscores the value of the Glasgow Helping Heroes model. It certainly signals the benefit of this approach, not only to SSAFA, but I think to local authorities and wider armed forces charities in the sector and further beyond alike. And so we're very pleased to welcome its publication, and we hope it's of value not only internally to SSAFA, but to many others who choose to read it, and I recommend that they do, because there's plenty to learn from it. Thank you.
So just before we have a discussion, I've no idea whether we've had a flood of questions or not. Sorry? I'm waiting. Okay. But sort of written questions, please stick a hand up and let's have a sort of open conversation. I do just want to say three closing points. Firstly, this work, Steve, Fiona, is really important, and Tom, your words were spot on, because anecdotes are good, but actually having some substance to go back to those who support us and enable us to deliver this is really important, and we've never had it before. We've just had the odd case study. So to have something substantial that says £6.33 for every quid you put in, and it would have been more, 11.68 was the figure you quoted, is hugely important, and we really value it. So the partnership between Stirling, Glasgow Caledonian Universities and Forces in Mind Trust to make this happen, I cannot thank you enough. Secondly, we could not deliver this, and SSAFA would not be able to continue to deliver this without the support of Glasgow City Council. and we really value that. We love the partnership. It's run for 12 years, and we think it goes from strength to strength, and we think we deliver good work for the city to support those who've served this country. We deliver it with the City Council, we deliver it with an increasing number of other organisations who are prepared to underwrite it, and I cannot thank you enough. But my greatest thanks go to Rachel and your team, because you are outstanding in what you deliver. And just listening to that one case study, one out of, and since you were set up, I think the figure is, and it's probably gone up since the report, 2,210 individuals or families you've supported. You are changing lives every day, and you should be so proud of what you do. We are very proud. Thank you very much. So because we haven't had a flood of bits of paper coming to the front, would anyone like to open a conversation to either challenge or say where we can do things better? Because notwithstanding the great work, one can always do better things. And Phil, I can see you're going to start. So we need to pass you a microphone, sir, I think. And this will get Selina fit.
I need the steps.
Hi there. It's just, yes, it's valuable doing a subject like this. What I would be concerned about is it just disappears into a void somewhere. Is it transferable to the general public? Would Sunny Rusak like to have a copy of this so that he can recognise that for every quid he puts in, he's going to get £6.38 or whatever it was back out again? 33, a few pence short. I mean, just if we have studies, they should be used in a wider context, not just in the context of Glasgow's Helping Heroes. And how do we get that across to the veterans organisations out with Glasgow, across UK?
So I think that's a great question. Firstly, fingers crossed we haven't put official sensitive or anything like that on it, so we can distribute this and we can be proud of this, as we should be proud of it, as should Glasgow as a city be very proud of this. So there is every intention of getting this out. I'll let Tom in a second talk about how he might use his influence more widely. But one of the things that, you know, and I'm being completely frank here, and I know I'm being filmed, but I'll be honest, is the only large urban area that has picked up this model is Glasgow. And 11 out of 10 to Glasgow City Council for sticking with it, because I know how challenging funding is, and the fact that you've stuck with this and continued to support us is fantastic. But what this report will do is allow us to go to places like the northeast, where there are large concentrations of veterans, and say to, for example, Newcastle City Council, you could do quite well, and look at the evidence that we've got. Because I have tried to speak to other, large urban areas where we recruit and people from, and therefore they return to, and we haven't had the take-up. So that's how I see us using it. Tom, do you want to pick up some of that?
Yep. Well, I mean, Forces in Mind Trust is not a campaigning organisation, but we feel very passionately that people need to see the evidence that we've put together, along with others. We're not the only organisation that does that. But if we get that evidence into the right places, into the right hands, then the change can happen. So as long, just like SSAFA does, we have plenty of conversations with Westminster parliamentarians, but also with MSPs too, and with others in other devolved assemblies. And also we've done plenty of work out into the regions, and such as our work in terms of covenant delivery, which varies across the United Kingdom too. But I think being able to have something of this substance, something as well grounded as this and as well researched as this, is something that we will be putting on ministers' desks, on local authorities' desks, and beyond. because they don't have to start from scratch. They can pick up a model which, yes, will need to be adjusted for regional circumstances and for the laydown and particular environment. But there is a model there that can provide a framework. And I think that's the powerful thing. And certainly that's something that we'll continue to push, and we'll continue to press with all the people that we have as our key influencers, if you like, to try and make the change that we want to see happen.
Just to add very briefly to that, I completely support both of that, and one of the messages we've been trying to drive from the findings from the research is that there is definitely merit in looking at other areas across the UK where there are concentrations of veterans and there isn't this kind of service. I think if anyone does actually have a phone number for Rishi Sunak, let me know, because actually I think there's potentially wider implications beyond the armed forces charity sector. Actually, it's not just veterans that struggle. You know, there are particular issues that some veterans face, but there are a lot of people who struggle with the complexities of multi-agency public services, and so there is potential for this kind of one-stop shop and the navigation aspect in particular to be of value on a much wider basis. Andrew's run off.
I see a hand.
Thanks so much.
This is a question for Stephen, I think, but not restricted to him. I'm Gavin Davey, and I'm the Director of the RAF Benevolent Fund for Scotland and Northern Ireland. All organisations who work with veterans, whether they be statutory, military charities or others, they can reach and they can inform, but then they come across this constraint and this huge frustration of the combination of being a veteran and Scottish, which brings with it tremendous pride. You mentioned being able to give veterans the confidence to ask for help, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you went about it, because it really is the huge constraint with all those who are trying to do good work with veterans.
I can say a little bit, but I am going to pass this back to Rachel, because it is Rachel and her team that do it. I mean, I could say a bit about the kind of proactive communication, the way that they build relationships. Some of the really proactive stuff they did through the tightest part of the lockdown, which I didn't mention in the presentation because there's only so much time, actually going out to support people where they were, because, you know, recognising the challenges of lockdown, all of those things are really important. But I think Rachel, I will hand this over to you.
Thank you. I think there's two main ways that we try and encourage our clients to be able to ask for help and feel the confidence to do that. And the first is the support that we offer at Glasgow's Helping Heroes isn't time bound, and that means when we say this, you know, over 2,000 clients that we've helped over the last 12 years, some of them we may have seen, it was before my time here, but we may have seen 12 years ago, and they've come back to us at different points, and we will keep seeing them. There's other people that we see maybe on a weekly basis. They'll pop in and see us and ask us a small question, and we're open to that. We don't say, you know, once this interaction is finished, that's our relationship over. They're welcome, you know, to pop in and see us, give us a call, whether it's a big question or a small query, we're happy to help. I think the second thing we're doing is we help facilitate the relationship with other agencies. So here today is our CAB advisor, Robbie, that's in our office twice a week. So a lot of our clients don't feel comfortable going into the main Citizens Advice Bureau. It's quite busy, they're not familiar with the environment, but they're familiar with us in our office. So instead of them having to go to the bureau, they can come back to us and see hopefully our friendly faces, and also meet Robbie or one of his colleagues and get the advice from that agency but within our environment. And maybe in future, if they have a question for Citizens Advice, they might feel more confident to go to the bureau directly and not feel they have to come through us. And that transfers across different areas as well. So Steve mentioned housing sometimes having complexities and has its own language, as well as the military sector has its own language, and those two languages don't always go very well together. So we almost provide a translation service so that we can have a three-way conversation with our client, with the housing provider, and with ourselves, and both the housing provider and our client can see what they want is the same outcome. They're just using different words to describe it, and the frustrations they have are not with a reluctance to answer the query they have. They just don't understand what each other's saying. So if we can get them speaking to each other directly and speaking the same language, we can cut ourselves out of the equation. I mean, ultimately, it would be great to have, helping heroes or similar in other areas, but it would be better if we weren't needed at all, and that people felt able to have those. We'd like to make ourselves, obsolete and redundant, that isn't needed. But while it is, we can help facilitate those conversations at an individual level and maybe educate different partners as we go through that, so that our clients can then feel confident going direct to the housing advisor with a question instead of phoning us and saying this thing hasn't happened and then we have to dig into it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Couple more, yeah. Can I just make a supplementary point or question? It'll be the last thing I say, to be honest. Would you say that a personal service and the ability to develop trust and confidence is part of the answer here? And not having a centralised helpline or phone number to call?
I think both approaches have their benefits. I think for a lot of the people that we see, they like to see us in person. They like to know who they're speaking to, and that's really beneficial. Other people benefit from having that central number. Maybe if it's maybe a more straightforward query, or if it's a technical question, that they can go into they just need to be pointed in the direction, and a central line is fantastic. I think for those that need, so my first degree was in education, and we talked about scaffolding learners, and I feel for some of our clients, I think of it as scaffolding them, that we can provide a lot of support with the first question and then gently remove that support, and having the personalised approach there works really well, that over time we can adjust to how much support they need and answer it in that way.
Can I put a view on that as well? Because I think it's a really interesting question. So I think we need as many areas where people can access support as we possibly can, for two reasons. Firstly, because it's complicated and they don't know where to start. And they'll start from the one direction you probably don't expect them to start. So it might be they've heard of SSAFA and they ring up, as Gavin, I think you know, called Forces Line, which takes about 30,000 calls, emails and web chats a year. And the team are great, but they will almost certainly pass it down to whichever part of the organisation, or it might be to another charity who can best help the individual. And secondly, you need a variety of approaches, because it takes courage for people to ask for help, and Steve's brought it out in his presentation. And they may not want to walk in first time, and show their face. They want to say, we've all heard it, I've got a friend who's struggling a bit, and so we've got to give people as many opportunities, and some of it will be central helplines, some of it will be facilities on the ground. Equally critical, and you know this from your service and I know it from mine, is the network of mates, Facebook groups and things like that, who probably pick up, somebody says, I haven't heard from old Gregory for a bit, and somebody then pops round and it snowballs from there. So we need a breadth of ability. Sorry. Right, a couple more, and then I think we'll probably call on.
This lady beat you to the punch.
Leslie Haddle, Glasgow City Council. So I think just probably in response to that question, Tad, what Rachel had said there, I believe that Helping Heroes is now a brand that's trusted across the city, both by the service user, but for herself, not only as a funder, as a referral partner. I know when I refer a client to Rachel and the team, Simon, Gary, everybody, that they're going to get the best service, and we do believe that that holistic service is the best option for veterans returning to the city. I appreciate, you know, the helplines, etc., and to give the widest support available. But for us, we know that one-stop shop approach, and that was the model that, you know, that was created at the start, and we started small and then built, you know, employability services, etc., onto that is definitely the best approach. But I definitely think the fact that it's a trusted brand, service users, you've said, speak to each other, take each other along to the service, and our other foreign-based partners, you know, that from the group that Phil chairs, they also trust implicitly that when they refer somebody on to Rachel and the team, that they're going to get the best possible service. So I think that's recognised widely across the city.
And Leslie, thank you for your enduring support. You know, it's so important.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. Maurice Corrie, I'm the Provost. I'm going to put that down. Voice is loud enough, I think. I'm speaking as the Provost of Argyll and Bute, Lord Provost, also as Chairman of the Cross-Party Group in the Scottish Parliament for Armed Forces and Veterans community. And can I first of all invite Rachel to come and present your report on one of our meetings that we're going to have? I think it'd be very good. And secondly, I will undertake to make sure as a parliamentary question put about report into the Scottish Parliament through my convener. But can I also say one thing? I'm delighted to hear that you're going to give this out to the 32 local authorities. And I speak now here as a local authority head of that, and civic head of that, in Argyll and Bute. But can I also ask you to put them out to also a copy to the Armed Forces and Veterans Champions, because we're doing a big drive at the moment to make sure they're on board. And if we can do this, we know that they then feel valued. And I'd ask you to do that, and Veterans Scotland can help you give you the details. But well done, doctors, and both doctors at times too, for all the work you've done, because I know that FiMT are great at supporting these operations, and your predecessors I worked with closely before. Thank you.
Any more? Oh,
Any more? Thank you for being here. Lord Provost, it is a great honour that you have come to join us, and I really thank you for taking the time. I'm not putting you under any pressure, and the answer, Mum, could be no. Would you like to say a word or about... I put her under pressure.
I've actually been talking the whole day because we had Glasgow City Council's full council today, so my throat's away, my voice is gone. But I'm actually delighted to be here. I was speaking to the officers in the car about coming here. Discovered a lot of very interesting things about my own family in terms of military just very recently. So when you were talking about something way back in 1888, I'm pretty certain that that organisation at the time would have looked after my grandmother's family because her father had died at the Somme. So the work that you do in the city is, you know, it's invaluable. We couldn't be able to do it without you. The council, is it Rachel? Rachel and Phil, I mean, they're just first-class people doing everything they can to help the veterans, and I'm delighted to be here, and long may this work continue, and good luck with it all.
Okay, what do we do now?
I'll tell you. Thank you. So thank you very much to the panel here, and thank you all very much for coming today. I just wanted to say on behalf, personally on behalf of me and the GHH team, past and present, thank you very much to Steve and Fiona. When we first put out the tender to see who would do this research, Steve and Fiona asked if they could come and meet the team, and then they brought cakes, and from that moment I thought we would get on well with them, and they've been brilliant over the past 2.5 years, so thank you from all of us. The live stream is now going to end. For those that have joined us online, for those that are here in person, there are more drinks and canapes next door, so please do join us. You'll have probably seen the GHH team moving around beforehand. But if they could just stand up for me just now, the current GHH team, please. Give a wee wave. Thank you very much. Please go and talk to them. They're all excited to network and to talk to everyone. So please go and talk to the team. One last thing. We are having an open day tomorrow in the Pearce Institute. So thanks to some specific funding we've been able to do up our office a little bit. So we thought we'd roll everything in together. So we've got an open morning tomorrow. There's some posters about it next door as well. So if you can, please feel free to drop in and see the office as well. But thank you very much, everybody. Please head next door and have a drink with us. Thank you.